The art of human negotiation. The Centaurian Empire had conquered 12 star systems, negotiated peace treaties with silicon-based life forms, and even managed to establish trade routes through the infamous nebula of eternal storms. Yet nothing in Ambassador Exorval's 300 years of diplomatic service had prepared them for dealing with humans. It started with what the humans called a preliminary meeting at Starbase Gamma 9. Exorval had arrived with their usual diplomatic entourage, 3 protocol droids, a quantum AI for real-time analysis, and a team of cultural experts. The human delegation consisted of exactly one person, Ambassador Isabella Martinez, wearing what their database identified as a business casual outfit and carrying nothing but a small device they called a tablet. Ambassador Exorval, Martinez said, extending her hand with what their cultural database warned could be either a greeting or a prelude to ritual combat. I hope you had a pleasant journey through the Carina Arm. The solar flares can be quite troublesome this time of year. Exorval's primary heart skipped a beat. Their secondary heart began compensating immediately. How did she know about their detour through the Carina Arm? That route was supposed to be classified information. The journey was adequate, Exorval responded, their chromatophores shifting to a cautious shade of mauve. Shall we proceed with the formal negotiations regarding the disputed mining rights in the Helio sector? Martinez's smile widened slightly. Of course. But first, would you care for some coffee? I brought some fresh Colombian beans. Or perhaps some tea. I remember reading that Centaurians have a fascinating ceremony involving fermented crystal nectar. The quantum AI immediately flagged this as a potential trap. The mention of their sacred crystal nectar ceremony couldn't be coincidental. Yet Martinez's vital signs showed no indication of deception, just genuine warmth and interest. Coffee would be acceptable, Exorval said, watching as Martinez expertly operated a small device that produced the aromatic brown liquid. The cultural experts were frantically updating their databases. What followed was 3 hours of what humans called small talk, a devastating psychological warfare technique disguised as casual conversation. Martinez asked about Exorval's family spawning pod, complimented their chromatophore patterns, and somehow extracted details about Centaurian mining operations that even the Empire's High Council didn't know about. So, Martinez said, after her third cup of coffee, about those mining rights. I was thinking we could explore a joint venture approach. Your Empire's expertise in crystal formation combined with our excavation technology could benefit both our species. Exorval's threat assessment systems were screaming. This was the moment they had prepared for, the human negotiator would surely reveal their true demands. Instead, Martinez pulled up a series of graphs on her tablet, showing projected profit margins that made all 3 of Exorval's hearts race. Of course, she continued, her voice carrying what their AI classified as genuine concern, we'd want to ensure proper environmental protections for the crystal forests. I heard they're quite similar to the ones near your spawning grounds. Exorval felt their defensive colors draining. How did she know about the crystal forests? More importantly, why did her environmental impact assessment make so much sense? By the end of the meeting, Exorval had agreed to a joint mining operation that somehow gave humans access to 3 previously restricted sectors while simultaneously increasing Centaurian profits by 300%. The quantum AI had crashed trying to calculate how this outcome had been achieved through nothing but friendly conversation and hot beverages. As Martinez gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. Oh, an ambassador. I'd love to learn more about that crystal nectar ceremony sometime. Perhaps over dinner next week? Exorval's chromatophores flashed emergency patterns. The cultural experts began drafting urgent warnings to the Empire. The protocol droids initiated emergency shutdown sequences. They had just discovered humanity's most powerful diplomatic weapon, genuine interest combined with relentless friendliness. That evening, Exorval sent an urgent message to the Imperial Council: humans have mastered the art of getting what they want by actually caring about what you want. Request immediate update to diplomatic protocols. Also, sending specifications for coffee makers, classify as weapons of mass cooperation immediately. The response from the Council was swift: begin immediate study of human small talk. Priority level, critical. And, find out where we can get coffee, cookies, and calculated chaos. The first annual Earth Embassy reception on Diplomatic Station Alpha was supposed to be a simple cultural exchange event. Instead, it became known across 5 galaxies as the incident that launched 1,000 protocols. Ambassador Exorval, still recovering from their coffee-fueled negotiations with Isabella Martinez, had been designated as the senior alien representative. Their mission was simple: observe human diplomatic gatherings and develop countermeasures. They arrived with a full complement of protective gear, including psychic shields and a personal AI program to detect manipulative friendliness. The embassy's grand hall had been transformed into what humans called a cocktail party setting. Exorval's threat assessment systems immediately identified multiple psychological warfare elements: round tables deliberately sized to encourage mingling, ambient music calibrated to promote relaxation, and most terrifying of all, a massive buffet table laden with something called finger foods. Ambassador Exorval. The voice belonged to Thomas Richardson, the newly appointed Earth Embassy's head of protocol. So glad you could make it. Have you tried the cookies? My grandmother's recipe. Exorval's protective shields registered an unprecedented surge of genuine warmth and hospitality. Their AI translator nearly overloaded trying to process the layers of meaning in the word grandmother. The reception quickly became a masterclass in human diplomatic warfare. Representatives from 30 different species found themselves helpless against Earth's most potent weapons: small talk, baked goods, and the dreaded networking. The Arcturian ambassador, a being composed entirely of crystalline thought structures, was cornered by a human cultural attaché who seemed genuinely fascinated by quantum consciousness engineering. Within an hour, they had agreed to host an interspecies poetry symposium. The hive mind of Beta Reticuli, famous for never engaging in individual conversation, somehow ended up in an passionate debate about soccer with 3 junior human diplomats. By the end of the evening, they had committed their entire neural network to organizing an intergalactic sports league. But the true crisis began when Richardson introduced what he called "my mother's secret recipe" chocolate chip cookies. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The Rigelian ambassador, whose species communicated entirely through mathematical equations, attempted to reverse engineer the recipe using advanced quantum computing. The Zeta 9 Collective, known for their stoic devotion to pure logic, requested the establishment of a permanent cookie trade agreement. Exorval watched in horror as centuries of carefully maintained diplomatic distances crumbled in the face of fresh-baked goods and genuine human interest in everyone's cultures, families, and traditions. The real secret, Richardson confided, offering Exorval a still-warm cookie, is adding a pinch of sea salt. Brings out the sweetness, you know. That simple statement sparked a 3-hour discussion about the role of mineral extraction in galactic trade relations, somehow resulting in the establishment of the first interspecies culinary and mining coalition. The breaking point came during what humans called cleanup time. As the evening wound down, Richardson and his team began insisting on helping everyone with their ceremonial robes, offering take-home containers of leftover food, and worst of all, making plans for future get-togethers. "We should do this again soon," Richardson called out as the shell-shocked diplomats departed. "Maybe next time everyone can bring a dish from their home world." Exorval's final report to the Imperial Council was brief but urgent: humans have weaponized hospitality. Their potluck concept threatens the very foundation of diplomatic distance. Request immediate development of defense strategies against what they call recipe sharing. Also, requesting permission to accept invitation to next month's game night. For research purposes only, of course. The Council's response was equally brief: permission granted. Bring cookies. As news of the reception spread across the galaxy, new diplomatic protocols were hastily written. But it was too late. Humanity had introduced something far more dangerous than traditional warfare, genuine friendship and cultural exchange, wrapped in a layer of sugar and butter. Part 3, The Smile Offensive. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps' Emergency Council convened in their highest security chamber aboard Space Station Omega. The agenda, addressing the growing crisis of human nonverbal communication. Leading the briefing was Senior Analyst ZYX-427, who had sacrificed 3 of their emotional processing nodes studying human facial expressions. Esteemed colleagues, ZYX-427 began, their photoreceptors dimming with stress, I present the Human Diplomatic Threat Assessment Scale, or HDTAS. We can no longer ignore the devastating effectiveness of what humans call body language, particularly their most potent weapon, the smile. The assembled diplomats shuddered. Many had personally encountered human smiles in the field. Some were still in therapy. The presentation screen flickered to life, displaying footage from recent diplomatic encounters. The first clip showed Isabella Martinez conducting what humans termed a casual business lunch with the Andromedian Trade Federation. Observe, ZYX-427 highlighted, how the human maintains exactly 3.7 seconds of eye contact while displaying precisely 17 teeth. This combination, according to our research, indicates what they call being personable, a state of calculated approachability that renders defensive measures useless. The next clip featured Thomas Richardson demonstrating something even more terrifying, the head tilt combined with raised eyebrows, a gesture that had somehow resulted in the Plutonian Mining Consortium voluntarily sharing their secret asteroid harvesting techniques. But the real bombshell came during the analysis of what humans called Casual Friday, a mysterious ritual that had thrown the entire diplomatic community into chaos. The footage showed human diplomats arriving at meetings in what they termed business casual attire, creating unprecedented levels of psychological disarmament through the power of rolled-up sleeves and comfortable footwear. The humans claim this practice promotes a more relaxed atmosphere for dialogue, ZYX-427 reported, their voice modulator crackling with disbelief. Our studies show it increases treaty signing rates by 47% and doubles the likelihood of off-the-record information sharing. The council chamber erupted in concerned murmuring. Ambassador Exorval, still recovering from the cookie incident, raised all 3 of their appendages to speak. We must address the most dangerous development yet, they announced gravely. Humans have begun combining their smile offensive with something they call active listening. The emergency lights automatically activated at this revelation. Active listening, the practice of showing genuine interest and engagement in conversation, had already dismantled 3 centuries of carefully maintained diplomatic barriers. Last week, Exorval continued, their chromatophores pulsing with distress, I observed Ambassador Martinez nodding thoughtfully during a trade dispute. She then summarized the key points of both arguments and suggested a solution that made everyone feel heard and understood. It was most unsettling. The Council's AI analyst projected a disturbing trend. Human diplomats were increasingly supplementing their smiles with supportive gestures, empathetic responses, and worst of all, sincere compliments about other species' cultural achievements. They've even begun learning our traditional greeting gestures, reported the Syrian ambassador, their tentacles trembling. Last month, Richardson performed a perfect spiral of respect before our High Council. The High Chancellor was so moved, they invited him to their spawning ceremony. The final straw came during the presentation of the Office Environment Analysis. Humans had introduced something called water cooler chat to multi-species diplomatic spaces, creating informal zones where representatives from historically hostile species found themselves casually discussing their weekend plans and sharing pictures of their offspring. As the emergency session concluded, the Council issued new guidelines for all diplomatic personnel. Maintain minimum safe distance from human facial expressions. Install emotion dampeners during informal gatherings. Never, under any circumstances, accept an invitation to what humans call team-building exercises. But even as the protocols were being distributed, news arrived that Martinez had organized an interspecies karaoke night for the following week. Attendance was officially discouraged. It was already fully booked. The Council's final report summed up their predicament: humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their resourcefulness, it's their infuriating ability to make other species feel genuinely valued and understood. We recommend immediate development of countermeasures against their people skills, although preliminary research suggests resistance may be futile. A postscript was added in trembling script: they're teaching other passive-aggressive paradise. The new Saturn Trade Conference was supposed to be a straightforward negotiation over interstellar shipping routes. Instead, it became a masterclass in what the Galactic Intelligence Service would later classify as humanity's most refined psychological warfare technique, office politics. The trouble began when Isabella Martinez introduced the concept of email to the multi-species diplomatic corps. What seemed like a simple communication tool quickly revealed itself as an intricate battlefield of subtle dominance displays and ritualistic politeness. Per my last message, Martinez wrote in a reply to the Arcturian delegation, copying 17 other species representatives, as previously discussed, were quite excited about the proposed trade corridor through the Carina Nebula. The Arcturian ambassador's translator matrix crashed trying to decode the layers of meaning in per my last message. 3 different species diplomatic AIs flagged it as a potential declaration of war. The hive mind of Beta Reticuli spent a full solar cycle analyzing the implications of being included in the CC field versus the to field. But the true chaos erupted when Thomas Richardson introduced what he called a friendly reminder about the upcoming deadline for route proposals. The phrase friendly reminder triggered emergency protocols in 12 different embassies. Just circling back, Richardson wrote in a follow-up message, to touch base about the outstanding items from last week's meeting. Looking forward to your thoughts. The Rigelian ambassador, attempting to decode the message, suffered a minor logic breakdown. How could one circle back in linear time? What base was being touched? Why were the items outstanding? Their finest linguistic experts worked around the clock to understand why humans insisted on using sports metaphors in professional communications. The situation escalated further when Martinez employed the devastating "let's take this offline" technique during a heated debate about fuel station placement. Nobody could determine exactly where "offline" was, but the phrase somehow resulted in 3 trade agreements and a cultural exchange program. "I'm just thinking out loud here," Richardson casually mentioned during one particularly tense session, unleashing a new wave of confusion among species who communicated primarily through telepathy. The Quantum Consciousness Collective spent 3 days contemplating the philosophical implications of thinking out loud versus thinking silently. But the defining moment came during what humans called a reply all chain. What began as a simple meeting request somehow evolved into a 47-message thread about appropriate times for lunch breaks, proper protocol for booking conference rooms, and whether the station's artificial gravity should be adjusted for comfort rather than efficiency. The Centaurian Empire's diplomatic corps watched in horror as their carefully crafted image of stoic professionalism crumbled in the face of a debate about proper break room etiquette. Their final report to the Imperial Council included a new term: passive-aggressive PowerPoint presentations. Ambassador Exorval, now considered the leading expert in human communication patterns, attempted to catalog the various levels of email significance. Kind regards, standard diplomatic closure. Best regards, slight tension detected. Regards, serious diplomatic incident in progress. Best, prepare for possible war. Thanks in advance, ultimate power move, immediate evacuation recommended. The diplomatic corps' AI systems began detecting disturbing patterns in human communication methods. They had somehow weaponized politeness itself, creating a complex system where the true meaning of a message often lay in what wasn't said. "Just wanted to follow up." Became the most feared phrase in diplomatic circles, carrying more weight than any formal declaration of hostilities. The final straw came when Martinez introduced the concept of the team-building retreat. The mere suggestion of forced social interaction combined with trust exercises sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community. The Arcturian ambassador, upon learning about icebreaker games, immediately requested political asylum. As the conference drew to a close, the various species representatives found themselves inadvertently adopting human communication patterns. The hive mind of Beta Reticuli caught itself using the phrase, "let's put a pin in that," during a critical negotiation. The Quantum Consciousness Collective began ending their telepathic transmissions with "warm regards." Richardson's final email to the conference attendees included the most terrifying human phrase yet, "let's schedule a quick sync to touch base about next steps. A calendar invite will follow." The galaxy would never be the same. The ultimate weapon, kindness. The Rigelian conflict had raged for 3 centuries. Two deeply entrenched species, fighting over a chain of resource-rich planets, their hatred crystallized by generations of mutual distrust. The Galactic Security Council had tried everything: sanctions, treaties, technological deterrence. Nothing worked. Then humanity got involved. "Have you considered," Isabella Martinez said during her first briefing on the conflict, "just inviting both sides over for dinner?" The suggestion triggered 17 different diplomatic warning systems. The Galactic Council's AI predicted a 99.9% chance of catastrophic failure. Ambassador Exorval's chromatophores displayed patterns previously only seen during solar flares. Yet somehow, 3 weeks later, the leaders of both Rigelian factions found themselves in the Earth Embassy's newly constructed community center, surrounded by what humans called potluck dishes from 30 different species. "The thing about breaking bread together," Thomas Richardson explained while serving something called mac and cheese to a bewildered Rigelian elder, "is that it's hard to maintain centuries of hatred when you're complimenting someone's recipe." The humans had done something unprecedented. They'd stripped away all formal diplomatic protocols. No ceremonial guards. No quantum AI translators. No ritual declarations of position and status. Just comfortable chairs, good food, and what Martinez called a casual chat. "You know," she said, addressing both Rigelian faction leaders, "your species' shared history of crystal engineering is fascinating. Have you ever considered combining your techniques? The potential applications could benefit everyone in the sector." The Rigelian leaders, who hadn't directly spoken to each other in 50 years, found themselves drawn into a discussion about crystalline architecture. By the time Richardson brought out his grandmother's cookies, they were sharing stories about their first experiences with mineral formation. The breakthrough came during what humans termed cleanup time. Working together to sort recyclables from composting materials, Earth's environmental protocols had somehow become galactic standard. The Rigelian leaders discovered they shared similar views on waste management efficiency. Perhaps, one leader cautiously suggested, we could establish a joint environmental protection zone around the disputed planets. The other leader, helping to wash dishes, another mysterious human ritual that somehow facilitated diplomacy, agreed. We could combine our crystal growing techniques to create sustainable habitats. Martinez and Richardson exchanged knowing glances but said nothing, demonstrating humanity's most devastating diplomatic skill, knowing when to shut up and let others talk. The Galactic Council watched in amazement as 3 centuries of conflict began to unravel over dessert and coffee. Their analysts couldn't comprehend how humans had achieved with kindness what armies and sanctions had failed to do. The formal peace treaty was signed a month later, but the real work had been done that evening in the community center. The humans had introduced something more powerful than any weapon: genuine connection. As news of the Rigelian resolution spread, the Galactic Diplomatic Corps finally understood humanity's true power. It wasn't their technology, their resilience, or even their notorious email etiquette. It was their fundamental belief that everyone, regardless of species, deserved to be heard, understood, and offered a warm chocolate chip cookie. Ambassador Exorval's final report to the Imperial Council contained a striking observation: Humans have mastered the art of turning enemies into friends not through force or fear, but through something far more powerful, genuine kindness and really good food. Request immediate revision of all diplomatic protocols to include mandatory cooking classes. The Council's response was unprecedented. They approved the budget for a galaxy-wide chain of community centers, each equipped with what humans called a fully stocked kitchen and comfortable couches. As Martinez and Richardson prepared for their next diplomatic assignment, they reviewed the latest galactic news. Former enemies were sharing recipes, trade disputes were being resolved over coffee, and even the most logical species were learning the value of a good hug. You know what the galaxy really needed? Martinez mused, packing up her diplomatic toolkit, now consisting mainly of cookie recipes and coffee-making equipment. What's that? Richardson asked, updating his calendar with the next month's worth of casual get-togethers that would probably reshape galactic politics. It needed someone to just be nice, she said, smiling as she read reports of peace breaking out across formerly hostile sectors. Sometimes the ultimate power move is just giving a damn about people. The Galactic Security Council, monitoring this exchange, immediately classified giving a damn as humanity's most powerful diplomatic weapon. But for once, they weren't afraid. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply being kind. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, countless species were learning that the path to peace might just be paved